Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Variety Gaming Podcast. The featured game for this episode is one I've been excited to talk about since we announced it in the Season 1 finale. It's called Enotria: The Last Song. After that, we'll get our subscription shuffle on and talk about a gaming subscription I've recently resubscribed to. Find out what that is later. Unfortunately, Rayu and his pseudo-beard will not be joining us for this episode as he is moving. He will be back for the season finale though, so look out. We of course would not end the season without him. Our game for this episode, like I said earlier, is Enotria: The Last Song. It's developed and published by Jyamma Games, which is an Italian developer. The description is: Enotria: The Last Song is a Soulslike set in a beautiful sunlit world inspired by Italian folklore, where the brightest sun casts the darkest shadow, where unique role-altering masks face formidable foes and alter reality with the power of Ardore to unravel the secrets of Enotria. Available on the PC, PS5, and finally the Xbox Series consoles. Released on September 16th, 2024. Now, as I mentioned, this is developed and published by Jyamma Games, which is an Italian developer. Now, a little bit of backstory on this particular developer. It's a small indie dev team in Italy. It's about 50 people, at least from the information that I could find online. Their previous games that they've made were 4 mobile games that honestly weren't anything that spectacular. They weren't bad, they were just not that great. They just weren't anything to be excited about. Now they're making Enotria. It's their first attempt at something more complex, what they described as a AA game. Other games in this genre, Lies of P, Thymesia, Neo, Remnant, all of these are made by companies who have lots of experience, lots of history. Some of them have been around since the 1990s, so they've been making games for a while. Jyamma Games started up in, I believe, 2019, so it's a big step up for the developer themselves, and you'll see why I mention that, particularly as I talk about it later on. I first came into contact with this game in 2023 at PAX. The demo was pretty good. I signed up for the newsletter so I could stay informed, get involved with the beta testing and stuff like that, but outside of that, the game at that time didn't really stand out to me. You know, it did kind of blend in with a lot of the other games. Of course, PAX was an exciting time. It was my first big gaming convention, so this game didn't really pop out immediately at that time. Later on, after PAX, I got invited to the beta test, which was a lot of fun. I can't say a whole lot about it, but it was lots of playing the same level over and over again, lots of surveys, lots of chatter in the Discord. I personally saw things that I was complaining about getting fixed, and so that was encouraging to see, especially from a relatively small team. Even if they are very talented, it's a small team. And I know that there was some turmoil behind the Xbox version and it not being able to release on time with everything else, which of course adds extra development time. All of that stuff. Now, thankfully, it is on Xbox, so Xbox fans rejoice. But that's been my experience with the game so far. I did get an opportunity to play the full version of the game when it released, but because I had been involved in helping with fix some of the bugs and stuff, and I mean, obviously I just said, hey, these are some of the issues that I have. I was just giving general feedback, right? because I had that perspective, maybe some things I didn't notice or I had fixes for already that people that got the game on launch maybe noticed right away. And so I know I saw a lot of the reviews online for this game, like the Steam reviews are overall mixed, I believe. I think it's like 65% of people recommended it. And so I think that for me, I was like, I didn't realize that maybe there were so many bugs. I didn't think that there were a lot of game-breaking bugs, even when I played back when the game launched. I didn't think that I had a lot of the problems that people I saw online were talking about with the AI completely glitching out and stuff like that. That did happen, but not at launch, at least for me. And now, after a couple of months, this was back in September, early September, well, mid-September, I should say. Now, taking a couple months break, end of November, here we are. I guess I started mid-November when I started preparing for this episode. And this game still runs great. I know that they have released a few updates. I'll talk about those in just a minute, but the game runs awesome. The audio and the video are great. The game runs good on my machine. The worlds are very well crafted. Especially the first two levels, in my mind, are very Soulslike in terms of how you run around and navigate the map, and then you unlock new shortcuts so that you can run back and forth and you feel more confident in exploring new areas. I really, really sincerely enjoyed a lot of that stuff. And my playthrough of this game, again, there was a couple of maybe small minor bugs, but nothing that was game breaking. And I think that's the important thing, especially with a developer of this size, is that the main things hit correctly. And the combat system in this game, in most Souls games that I play, I don't really get super involved in building the best build possible and min-maxing and all of this. I just kind of focused on what I feel at the time. Sometimes I go through Souls games and I prefer a little bit more of a faster play style. Other times I go for more of a greatsword play style. In this particular game, I went with something called the Juniper Sword, which is kind of in the medium range of weapons in terms of speed. It's not like the fastest, but it's not the slowest either. It's not like a colossal greatsword or something like that. And the combat with the parrying and attacking and dodging for me is really crisp. I didn't experience any moments where I felt like I should have gotten a parry and I didn't. Every time I got hit, I genuinely felt like it was my fault for not reacting in time. Same with dodging. I didn't feel like the hitboxes were really bad or anything like that. I will say that there were a couple of times where I got stuck on some like ledges and stuff like that, and also some of the jumping spots were a little bit confusing, but I can't say that I don't have that experience in other games too. Like, let's be honest, how many of us have died trying to jump in Dark Souls, in Elden Ring, in Sekiro? In Sekiro you have the glade or the prosthetic, but even so, a lot of those times you're still trying to jump places and you end up falling. Like, it just happens in these types of games. Nothing game breaking for me to where, I can't move through this wall or I can't go to this boss because this boss is just completely glitched, or anything like that. And I played a good amount into the story. This time I speed ran through the beginning portion just a little bit on one of my playthroughs. And I say one because since I played on launch, they have now added 2 different modes. Well, they separated one mode from another mode and more or less added it. So you have story mode and you have Soulslike mode now. And the wording in the official notice was a little bit confusing, but if I understand it correctly, the New Game Plus mode difficulty is what the Souls-like difficulty is, but the Souls-like difficulty starts you off at the very beginning, right? So it's like if you complete story mode and you go to New Game Plus, then that difficulty is what Souls-like mode is at the very beginning of the story at level 1. And at least that's how I understand it. If it is different, please somebody out there correct me. But let me tell you, the difference between story mode and Souls-like mode... Oh, by the way, Souls-like mode came out on October 2nd, if you want to look for that announcement. The differences between story mode and Souls-like mode are pretty drastic in my experience. Now, I have beat Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring and Sekiro and Nioh. Like, I've beat a lot of the Souls and Souls-likes out there. Didn't beat the first 2 Dark Souls, admittedly, but just skipped to 3. But this is genuinely difficult. You get less resources. It takes a lot more hits to kill an enemy. You really do need to use the right element. I got a little bit ahead of myself, I'll admit, in not explaining the systems before diving into this, but basically, like a lot of games, this has an element system, and the elements are in Italian, or they're Italian words, and so I'll be honest, I do not remember them. Thankfully, they have a little symbol chart in the top left that you can always look at, and so you know. And I use that symbol chart all the time when I'm playing the Souls-like mode. I don't use it very often when I'm playing the story mode. The story mode I could just breeze through. A lot of the bosses I would beat in maybe 2 to 3 tries for the difficult bosses. A lot of the foes that appear I would beat first try. Sometimes I would see a foe and I would see that I have 4 Estus flasks or Armonia flasks and think, oh yeah, no problem. I'm not even at full. I've got this many and I'll be okay. I'm sure that I can win. It'll be fine. I'll just focus up a little bit more. Focus on my parrying and my attacking. So story mode, you really can breeze through that, but I think that that's a good thing, because if you have a story mode that allows maybe less experienced gamers with Souls-likes, if it allows those gamers to try and play a game like this, because again, it looks really good and the fundamentals are there. I understand there is some jank back and forth, but the fundamentals of the game are there. The core gameplay is there and it is good. If you have a story mode that lets a newer player or a player who just doesn't enjoy that type of a challenge go through something like this, then I think that only benefits the developer and the one who is putting it out there, because they have this Souls-like mode and now it's come out a month later, right? They have this a month after release, I should say. they have this Souls-like mode, and it is a genuine challenge. And I understand some games like Dark Souls and Sekiro not having a difficulty slider. I understand that. For this game in particular, I think it is a good thing to have a story mode and a Souls-like mode. For some reason, for me, it just fits. It works well. I spent a good amount of time, majority of my time, in the Souls-like mode this go around. And it's also nice to see that they have not totally given up on the game and just, oh, well, you know, we've got some negative backlash, but they're really trying hard to steer the ship in the right direction. The bosses in the Souls-like mode versus the story mode, like I said, the story mode bosses I knocked over in just a couple of hits. In the Souls-like mode, they are lethal, especially Vermilion. The second boss, I mean, just, it took me so long before I finally beat him, and it was genuinely a pain. It took me a couple of hours, and I mean, I'll admit it, I'm not the best at the Souls games, but even so, it was a very good challenge, and I even knew what to do. The attacks are relatively simple, but you need to be perfect because the attacks do lots of damage. Now, it's true, maybe I had the wrong mask on. That's one thing that is very much encouraged in this game, is switching back and forth between your different masks. Kind of like swapping your loadouts mid-fight. It's allowed in this game, and it's actually one of the buttons, so you can do it very quickly. It lets you swap between 3 masks, and you can have 3 different loadouts, which is very nice. I think it also encourages boss diversity when you allow the player to be diverse as well in their playstyle. I personally just ran through with 1 mask and 1 main loadout that I used, and that seemed to work for a majority of the bosses, especially in story mode. Like I said, I just kind of ran through it. In Souls-like mode, I had to try a lot harder, and I did need to use my skills properly in order to either counteract whatever element the boss was using, or to then be aggressive and attack what the boss is using, right? Because especially in the situation with Vermilion, I'm going to call him Vermilion. The situation with Vermilion, I was getting one shot by the element that he was using, especially because the orbs were, he was shooting out these orbs, and I couldn't really outrun them. A smarter player would just switch to something that is resistant to that so they don't get absolutely one shot. But me, I was stubborn, and I just wanted to make sure that I was countering I stayed within melee range, and I was countering his melee attacks and not giving him the space to use these ranged attacks. That was my strategy, and through brute force it did work, but let me tell you, it was a lot of deaths, and the video will be playing, I'm sure, a majority of these deaths as I'm talking about this. But that steep curve I enjoy. I like that you can have both. You can have your cake and eat it too, if you will. Some players, it will take the fun out of it. For me, it didn't. If you really want to, just play the Souls-like mode. That is what it's there for. In the story mode, Veltha was the hardest boss for me, and one thing about this game that I'm not entirely swayed one way or another on is the random encounters with foes, which are basically bosses. I think there are just a few too many. I'll say like 4 or 5 too many of these random encounters. They're good, but having too many then makes the regular bosses have less impact. Now, I'm not saying that the boss design in this game is bad. I actually think that the boss design in this game is very good, especially in the Souls-like mode when you ramp it up like that. But the way it is currently, the random encounters just kind of, like I said, they take away from the main bosses, and this Veltha felt like a random encounter. I thought it was just some random, oh, okay, well, here we go. This is another red portal that we use. And nope, this is a boss that is probably the most difficult boss that I encountered in the game. And that's just because, like, it just came out of nowhere, right? It was just set randomly, and you're just like, whoa, oh, okay, here we go. We're fighting this person now with these abilities. It was absolutely crazy to me, but I also liked it. I thought the fight was good. I'm not complaining about the fight itself. It just seemed randomly placed for me, and that is how it is with a lot of the fights. They seem kind of randomly placed, and then when you go into a big boss arena, it's like, okay, well, you know, I mean, you're just like expecting something, right? Like really grand when you have these mini encounters. I don't know. That was my take on it. Through story mode, all of these random encounters weren't that difficult. In Souls-like mode, again, I've hammered it in. The difficulty ramps up. Overall, I think this game is an 8 out of 10. The fighting feels great. The game looks really good. It sounds really good. I excuse a lot of the jankiness, and maybe it's because I saw the beta version and got to be a part of that experience. But to me, it can be excused because, again, we've seen this type of stuff happen in Dark Souls. We've seen it happen in it happens in these other games, and these are studios that have experience with this stuff. Jyamma Games is not that. They're a small indie dev team in Italy, and they've made 4 mobile games to their name. You know, at least to Jyamma Games. So I think this is, again, I think it's a great game. Overall, 8 out of 10. $40 is the price on Steam currently. I believe when it released it was $50. I think now it's down to $40. Whatever the case, $40 now. I think it's worth it. Right now it's on sale on the Steam Winter Sale. You can find it on sale pretty regularly, I would imagine, for like $25. For sure it's worth that price. I thoroughly enjoyed this game, and I would recommend it to pretty much anyone, especially if you enjoy the Souls-like. I could see where if this game looks appealing to you and you're not even a Souls-like player, you could probably get into it playing on story mode. It might be a good kind of action-adventure game. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments what you think about Enotria. And also, now we've made it to the poll for the episode. We're throwing it in the middle of the episode here because it's related to our featured game. The poll for the episode is, which game mode is for you? What type of gamer are you? Are you a story mode player? Are you a Souls-like mode player? At least in relation to Enotria, the last song. What do you think? Would you go for the story mode? Would you go for the Souls-like mode? If you're on Spotify, let us know in the poll, or YouTube in the comments. I'm not sure what Apple has, to be completely honest with you. Or on X and Blue Sky. But yeah, highly recommend. Go check out Enotria, the last song, if you want your Souls-like fix at a pretty good price. Moving on to our next segment, we are going to do the subscription shuffle. Do. That's right, we're talking gaming subscriptions, but this subscription is for just one game. Now, one game is World of Warcraft. That's right, the World of Warcraft. Blizzard's pride and joy since 2004. Now, for a new person getting into World of Warcraft, it is absolutely daunting. Now, I started back in 2017, but currently the state the game is currently in is absolutely crazy for a new player to start. If you want to try the game, you get to play for free up until level 20. However, that is only the current version of the game, or what's called retail. There are still many other versions, and the best way I can think of is it's groups of servers that are different expansions or versions of the game. Those versions are Classic, the original game as it came out back in 2004. Hardcore Classic, same thing, but when your character dies, they're permanently dead. Well, they're not permanently dead. They convert to a classic character, but it's like a Iron Man mode in RuneScape. Season of Discovery Classic, which is classic with a twist on how your spells work. Anniversary Classic, which is World of Warcraft Classic servers that are celebrating the 30th anniversary of World of Warcraft. Those servers, I believe, will be transforming into the Burning Crusade servers, which is an expansion for World of Warcraft, the Burning Crusade. Cataclysm Classic. That's one of the expansions. Cataclysm. And then you have your retail or your current version of what. So there's like a ton of different servers and versions of the game, but a majority of them are locked behind the subscription, which is $15 a month. So if you want to try the game, you try like the smallest little fraction. I wouldn't even call it a demo, at least in comparison to the larger game. You don't really get a feel for the game, and you don't get a feel for other versions of the game either, which are drastically different. So for a new player to try World of Warcraft, it's you have to really want to play, or you have friends that are like, yo, you really have to come play with us, right? Or like people to really bring you in and invest you. That, in my mind, is the only way that World of Warcraft is getting new players. But like I said, I got into World of Warcraft back at the end of 2017, beginning of 2018. That's when my friends at the time started playing. They were really pushing to try and do some of the more difficult dungeons. And for the longest time growing up, I saw ads and gameplay. Some of my other friends played World of Warcraft, but I could never play it because it was straight up just like too expensive. And looking back, I understand from my parents' perspective, why would I pay a subscription for a game and then you can't play that game once the subscription time runs out? I totally understand. We had a ton of games at home. I was not deprived of video games in any way, right? But I couldn't play this one, and I really wanted to. Especially, actually, when the Cataclysm videos were coming out, and a lot of the marketing for that was really cool. And then I got to see my friends playing it too whenever I would go over to their house, and I could play it for a little bit, but like I couldn't really play it, right? And so I really wanted to play, and then when my friends were playing 2017, early 2018, I played. But at the time, it was to level 120, and they had started like a month before I started playing, and so they were already 120, and they were starting to push dungeons, and they just had one random, and I was trying to catch up. And at that time, the leveling process was really long, and I wanted to take my time and go through each expansion and complete as much as I possibly could, because I felt I probably wouldn't come back, or especially at the time with the level disparity, you would come in and just one-shot literally everything, and that's not fun. For some people it's fun. For me, it wasn't really that fun, especially when there were other areas in the game where I could be challenged more or less, right? So I kind of got left in the dirt. It was fine, but I played through some of the leveling, and eventually I kind of puttered out. I didn't actually make it. Then COVID hit towards the end of 2019, and that is when I really started playing a lot of World of Warcraft. And that was, I believe that was just before they squished everything down. And that was when I really got to enjoy my journey up to level 120, because I got to play at my own pace. I was doing it on stream too. I was streaming at the time. So I was playing WoW on Wednesday nights for like 5, 6, 7, 8 hours at a time. Just gaming mad. It was so much fun. Lots of good times playing that in that era. And now we're kind of coming out of it, and the game has, in addition to not being new player friendly, for the reasons we discussed of there being all these different versions and the trial being very limited, and then you pay your money, and you know what I mean. It's just kind of difficult. In addition to all that, now you have some of the expansions not being that great. I would agree they're not that great. They're okay, but they're not that great. And the stigma behind the company, it's really in a rough place. And I understand why people don't play the game. However, for me now, I've kind of abandoned the retail version of the game. I don't even play it anymore. I probably won't get the next expansion that comes out. For me, though, Classic is a lot of fun. I've been having just an absolute blast going through the leveling process. Now, some friends that I've had that I didn't even think would try the game or play it, now some of their folks are like, oh yeah, yo, let's try it, and they've given it a go and they're really enjoying it. And some people have returned after many, many years, and they say, this is the feeling that I got from playing World of Warcraft all those years ago. And the leveling in this is so much slower. It's so much more drawn out. The zones are paced a little bit slower. And one thing that I haven't brought up yet that normally gets brought up immediately when someone mentions World of Warcraft is add-ons. And when you try and play retail without add-ons, it is incredibly difficult. And for the average gamer, you probably don't even know what, I mean, you understand the concept of what an add-on is, like just based off of the name. But for World of Warcraft in particular, it means downloading an external application which will let you pick mods or add-ons that you want. And so then you have to browse through and figure what each of the add-ons do. And so then you click, oh, I want this one, this one, this one. And then you go back into the game, and then you have to configure the add-ons. Like, it is ridiculous. Classic, you don't actually have to play with add-ons. Now, it's true that it can be very confusing. This game was made in 2004, and it's true that this version of the game does have some quality of life improvements. But if you play the original Classic, it is a thinking person's game in terms of you really have to focus what's going on screen. You have to read some of the quest text to figure out where to go, which means you have to engage that brain just a little bit. But that's what I enjoy about it. You need to read the quest text in order to figure out what type of enemies you need to be gooning, or you need to figure out, oh, okay, I'm supposed to deliver this barrel of ale to this person who is over here, and this is the description of the area, and oh yeah, I see where it could probably be on my map. All of that stuff is a lot of fun. It's true that you will end up missing some stuff if you don't have add-ons. It will be a little bit slower, but I really enjoyed playing this game without add-ons. And if you choose to play without add-ons, then it's true it may be a little bit more difficult, but I think you will learn a lot more about the game as well, as opposed to having some of these add-ons just hold your hand. And in the retail version of the game, you're pretty overpowered when it comes to the general mobs. In this game, you need to take your time. In addition to focusing on the damage that you're doing with your spell rotation, you also need to make sure that you're not pulling too many people or mobs, because if you do, you will get overwhelmed very quickly. And so I just appreciate that kind of slower pace, and it's a shame that that is locked behind the paywall as opposed to the faster version of leveling in retail. And maybe it's because that incentivizes people to quickly subscribe. But I've really enjoyed the Cataclysm Classic. For me, Cataclysm Classic, it's the perfect spot between retail and normal Classic. You have some of the more quality of life features like the quest markers and that type of thing, but you still have the slower pace. You can't just completely dive in there. I understand why some people don't like the Cataclysm version, but for me, that is, I really enjoy it. Maybe it's because I also enjoyed the marketing material a long time ago, and I was like, oh, I always wanted to play Cataclysm. But even so, now it's a lot of fun to play, but it has such a barrier to entry. I feel like the only way that you will really try it and play it is if you have somebody to play with you. And I am a little bit different in the sense of I wanted to play the game so much, and I had just a little experience with some of my friends playing. And see, again, I had seen World of Warcraft being advertised for a long time, but it wasn't until my friend said, yo, come join us, right? Then I played a little bit and I got started, and yeah, then I quit for a while, but I came back and I played solo for a good long time and taught myself how to play the game. That experience, I think I've played a lot of other MMOs, and the leveling experience in WoW is pretty unique. I can't really put my finger on it. Maybe it's because it's a combination of the art style and how calming it is. I played a lot of RuneScape growing up. That game is a lot of fun. I say the combat feels kind of similar in the sense of there isn't a whole lot of buttons early on. Later on in the game, that's when the buttons really start maxing out. Maybe that's why I like the leveling process as opposed to later on in the game, because there's just too many buttons. But I don't know what it is about the WoW leveling process. I've played hundreds of hours of Guild Wars 2. I've played a lot of Final Fantasy, maybe 100 hours of Final Fantasy. I've played Elder Scrolls Online. Like I said, I played RuneScape. Like, I've played a ton of different MMOs. I gave Throne and Liberty a try. Really not my thing. Lost Ark, I also tried. New World, like, a lot of MMOs, but the leveling in WoW, especially the classic servers and versions, just, it feels great. And the quest system, yeah, it's kind of outdated, mostly because it's been copied so much, but the quest system is just the layout of the areas is so good. And so if you are a new person out there that maybe, oh, well, maybe I should try, just give it a go. And I would say try the classic versions. You know, try $15 for a month and try the classic versions. And one of my notes here is it's a lot of people say that it's expensive to play. And I mentioned, you know, give $15 for a month, give it a go, right? And for a lot of people, maybe that's a lot if you only have 4 hours to game a month. And so that's basically putting all your other games on hold, right? In order to play, I said 4, did I say 4 hours a month? I meant 4 hours a week. 4 hours a week to play. Maybe you only have 4 hours a month. If that's the case, then WoW really is not for you. But if you only have 4 hours to play and it's like, man, $15 a month, that would be the only game. You know, maybe it's not for you too, but maybe you only play for an hour, maybe you play for 2 hours. Then it's not necessarily worth it, I would agree. But if you're going to play the game for, you know, 3 hours a week, 4 hours a week, which it's not a ton. You know, maybe that's your weekend gaming session plus some during the week, during the work week or something like that. There is more than enough to do. Like, you can easily get your $15 worth if you are a new player. If you have been playing this game for years and years, you know, that's just how it is. If you're a new player, there is a ton of content. I understand if you just don't play that many games, then, you know, maybe a subscription-based MMO is just not the way. But if you are trying to get into MMOs, then WoW, it's tough to get over those few hurdles of like, oh man, maybe. But if you do, then there is a lot of game behind it, and it is a slower pace than what a lot of the other MMOs nowadays are all about. I would say take your time, because a lot of people quick, get to endgame to force the dungeons and stuff, but then it's like, but you're at the end of the game. And over time, if you do spend a decent amount of time playing this game, it, in my mind, does even out. For my particular stats, I've played 4 days total playtime on Cataclysm Classic, 12 hours Classic Anniversary, 20 days on my retail, which is my current World of Warcraft main, top 5 of my tunes or my characters for retail are 40 days, which is about 950 hours of playtime. So I've got about 1,050 hours total playtime in World of Warcraft across all of the servers. And I've spent about $900 for game time, for expansions, for any other cosmetics and stuff that I have purchased. So really, it's not as expensive as other games that I've bought. You know, if you buy a $60 game and you have to play it for 60 hours in order to get $1 an hour out of it. And now I'm not necessarily saying that the amount of enjoyment you get is directly correlated to how much you pay per hour, but for entertainment, it's not that bad. And again, if you're a new player, there's so much for you to experience that it's really not that. And I would say start with Classic, because again, you don't have to buy the expansions. You just pay your $15 and you get access to the entire Classic game, which is a ton of game. And it's often skipped in the retail versions. And I don't necessarily know how I feel about that. Maybe because they have all the different classic versions that it's not necessarily needed. But then again, why is that content there in the retail versions anyway? I'm not entirely sure. But I don't know. Classic is really great for leveling. It's very calm. It's just chill. Retail, all about that end game content. They just kind of push you through the leveling. You're incredibly OP. You just clear mobs. And then you're just in end game and you're forced to do group content and dungeons. So if you want a solo experience, just play some classic. Maybe grab a friend or two. If you're new to World of Warcraft, it can be a daunting subscription, especially when you compare it to like Xbox Game Pass, $10 a month, and you get a ton of other games. But if you can devote a couple of hours to WoW, you can get your money's worth and entertainment worth out of it, especially if you go for some of these classic servers. If you just try the demo and play to level 20 on retail, you're not going to have a good time. The demo is really not indicative of what the game is, and retail is just so add-on filled that it can be really, really difficult. And again, I say add-on filled, and I mean that you don't necessarily need the add-ons, but the game has become so reliant on the add-ons that it's incredibly confusing to play without. Classic, you can actually play without add-ons, and it's somewhat understandable if you've played either other MMOs before or just other types of action RPGs in general, like maybe you've played like Dark Souls or something like that. Games where you have to level up and allocate your stats, things of that nature. You can take it because, again, Classic forces you to go at that slower pace. You can learn this game, and it really is enjoyable once you start getting the hang of it. And it's even better with friends. I, again, play solo, but it's even better with friends. I say give it a go for a month. Just try it. One last thing before I wrap up. This is one of the few games that I have actually tried to learn more about by studying by studying the other media. So I listened to the audiobooks, and I got one of the physical books, or a physical copy of one of the books. And I learned more about the world and about some of the races. I learned about the orcs, and I learned about Sylvanas and what her motivation is. And I learned about the Well of Eternity and like all of this stuff. And that was cool to listen to while I was at work, which gave me a more of an appreciation for like the tutorial, especially in Classic, the intro cutscenes and all of that stuff. That was a lot of fun, and that added to my experience. I would encourage you to do that too, especially if you love games with deep lore. Check out some of the audiobooks, because the audiobooks are really, really cool too. So yeah, try WoW for a month, or if after hearing me ramble on and on about all of this random stuff, it's just really not for you, then it is what it is. Hopefully you enjoyed hearing this episode of the Variety Gaming Podcast, hearing about Enotria, a Soulslike RPG, and then the subscription shuffle with World of Warcraft and MMORPG. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to let us know. Spotify, YouTube, Apple comments, rate the show, chat with us about these games or others on X or Blue Sky at Variety Games Pod. Thank you so much for listening. And you know what? Your reward for listening and watching until the end, I'm going to be doing a special episode covering Spider-Man Remastered, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Marvel Spider-Man 2, and also Spider-Man 2 2004. Comparing them, my perspective, I played these games, well, I played Spider-Man 2 since I was a kid way back in 2004. That game was my jam. And so hear more about those, especially if you're a Spider-Man fan. Be sure to look out for that video, or if you're from the future, check it out on the Variety Gaming podcast. We will see you next episode.